So welcome to Mentor Talks. I'm TATIA, CEO and co-founder of Upnotch. Upnotch is a business mentorship platform for executives and entrepreneurs. We bring together industry leaders and like-minded individuals to help share knowledge through one-on-one mentorships or through these talks. If you want to grow your career or your business, feel free to sign up at Upnotch by downloading the app at Google Play or at the App Store. Today, we're really excited to hear from a very accomplished panel as they share their views on the changes that Apple is making to the IDFA and what that means for the mobile advertising industry. Our moderator today is Chris Cunningham, CEO and founding partner of C2 Ventures. Chris has an extensive background in mobile technology and was most recently president of Unicast. Before that, he was the VP at InfoSource, founder and CEO at AppSavvy, and he currently runs an awesome podcast called Superpowers. So you guys should all definitely sign up to that. So Chris, thank you so much for being here today and for leading our conversation.
Thank you, TATIA and the Upnotch team, and thanks for those wonderful plugs. We will always take new listeners and subscribers for Superpower. So thanks for that. So my role here today, which I'm very honored to host and kind of manage this group of panelists on a very important topic and a very timely topic. So we have some great questions that have been shared in advance of our panel, but also open to getting more questions as we go along. But to kind of tee this up, and again, thank you, Tati, and the Upnotch group for setting this up. So as we all know, or most of us, given that we're in this industry, back in June, Apple announced a planned change to the iPhone operating system that could impact how mobile advertisers track via IDFA. Given we all work in this space, we understand that's kind of the core identifier as relates to tracking people's behavior, both on apps and websites. This was potentially one of the biggest changes in the mobile app advertising ecosystem in the last 10 years. Took a lot of people by storm, big surprises, and quite frankly, I think shocked a lot of the industry as relates to their role. So for some of the industry, the IDFA removal and how their company would be impacted was pretty crushing, at least what we've gathered. So for others, there was a tremendous opportunity, and trying to understand and realize the pros and cons was something we really felt was an important topic. Either way, it could have caused enough of a challenge for Apple that already announced its delay of the rollout, and to also allow mobile advertising ecosystem more time to prepare. We also know that in the last couple of days, Apple has pushed back that rollout change, and that's something that we want to address and talk about today. So as we unpack what this means and Apple's decision and where things stand, there's a lot to discuss, and we brought together an incredible group of people that work very closely in this ecosystem that have different views and opinions across the mobile ecosystem. So let me quickly introduce them to you and jump right in. And forgive me for any mispronunciation, but hopefully we got all this right in advance. So Leo Giel is the CRO YouAppi. Leo's, he's an entrepreneur and advertising exec, changing the way brands leverage mobile media to engage with consumers and generate return on ad spend. Garrett MacDonald, someone I've known for a long time at Kochava, who's the EVP of sales. He brings more than 21 years of B2B sales management experience to his role leading his global sales efforts for Kochava, a top performer with Fortune 500 companies and early stage startups. Claire Rozain, user acquisition manager at Product Madness, actually a company that we used to work with back in the AppSavvy days, Claire. She is responsible for the social casino games at Product Madness. Previously, she worked UA for Match.com, and before that, mobility for Mappy. She is passionate about the top of the funnel, both paid and organic strategies to acquire the right users. And last but not least is Olivia Smith from App Marketplace. She's a growth expert. Olivia is an experienced growth marketing and operational professional with over 8 years of experience strategizing high-performance paid media, paid search, and organic brand growth campaigns for healthcare, tech, fashion, and education brands. I know Tatia introduced myself. I've been in ad tech for 20 years. responsible for the launch of AppSavvy, early kind of pioneering monetization in the app space. Also mentioned I worked in location data. So while I run a venture firm today and have stepped out of day-to-day operations in ad tech, media, and mobile, it's still very near and dear. So hopefully I can sort of drive this conversation from an unbiased perspective. So let's dive right in. That was a long introduction, but hopefully everyone has good context, and I'll look forward to hearing from the panel because that's really who we're here to hear from today. So first question, it's been roughly 8 weeks since Apple's announcement. How have things changed for you since then in terms of your perception of this coming change and its potential impact upon the mobile advertising landscape? I'm going to start that question with Garrett, followed by Olivia.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here. Thanks to YouAppi and Upnotch for inviting us, and happy to participate here in this discussion. I think for a lot of us, the writing has been on the wall for several years. There's really a history of breadcrumbs that Apple has been placing back, 2016 with LAT setting is enabled, and then 2018 with the launch of SCAD Network. 2019, they rolled out a rule that kids apps in the kids category can no longer use the IDFA. That went into effect earlier this year. And since June of this year, with the SCAD network enhancements, establishing that as really the primary method or mechanism for tracking on iOS with the IDFA opt-in, I think there's been a lot of, perception about the role of an MMP. And, it's a lot of talk about, this is Apple's move to eliminate MMPs from the ecosystem as if it's a, existential threat to, players in the space. I think that the over the last 8 weeks, the world or the advertising ecosystem has really come around to the fact that if there's one thing that's true about this announcement, it's that it's very confusing and that there's a lack of clarity with what has been announced. If deterministic attribution with an IDFA was easy, there was, obviously a need for MMPs in recent years. And if you think about, conversion bit theory and conversion bit values and, reorienting all of your marketing analytics around data provided through SCAD network, it's really difficult and it's incredibly demanding. So I think the role of an MMP was, the perception was that it was a threat to the MMPs. And I think now people are realizing that the role of an MMP becomes even more important given the rollout of IDFA opt-in requirements. And so I think there's an increased need for MMPs to be able to help advertising retool all of the systems and the infrastructure that we've built.
Great, thank you, Garrett. Have some follow-up questions, but Olivia, why don't you? Would love to hear your view as well.
Yeah, similar to what Garrett said. I, personally, being within this space, I felt like this was coming, especially with the location tracking that was rolled out a couple of years ago. That was like a big tee off for me. It's like if they're going to start picking and choosing what apps you can share your location or giving users the ability to do so, the next thing is going to be advertising. Similar to what Garrett said, there's always the breadcrumbs aspect. The one thing that I thought was a little bit differently, at least for me, is the fact that, when Apple did roll out the location tracking, it was pretty clear. I feel it was pretty straightforward in what was actually going to happen. But with IDFA, since it's been kicked off, it was, a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people. But what was lacking is the clarity and what's going to be happening. I think with the recent pullback on the release, I think Apple did feel a little bit of the heat that was being put on them from a lot of the top advertising firms. I mean, it's been everywhere. It's been in Adweek. Everyone is talking about it, and we've seen it even negatively affect their stocks because of that. I mean, it's such a deep layer of a ripple effect with it, and I don't think they really anticipated the amount of heat they were going to feel with it. So it's been really interesting. But yeah, echoing what Garrett said, there's just a real real lack of clarity, and I think they're trying to make up for that now, but it's also, they're still not being very open with it, even with that. So
just curious, because I think it's interesting, right? Like when I read about it, it seemed to be sort of a shots fired. This is coming, kind of embrace or prepare yourself. I don't know if it's necessarily Apple's responsibility to sort of have other, to kind of solve the challenges that other sort of companies in the ecosystem would face. So my question, this is for either the two of you or anyone on the panel, is like, what could they have done differently as it pertains to sort of this announcement? And then the second question, just given their market size and their market cap, I hear you on the stock price, but do they really, I'm curious to get what people think that the pushback was, outside of some headlines. Apple notoriously does things that works well for their ecosystem, given their kind of this full stack. So I'm just kind of, trying to understand, because I was surprised to see the pushback, like not something Apple would typically do.
yeah, I think there's a lot of things that can play into it, both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. But, with a lot of talk of some large app companies just being skeptical, sorry, it's Tuesday, skeptical about what exactly they are what their future is going to look like on the App Store. I mean, Zynga was a big one that had some conversations around it. It's like, what do we go forward with putting our app on the App Store? Like, there's a lot of apps, even one that I previously worked for, that doesn't even have their app on the App Store because of a lot of the tracking capabilities within that, and just how hard it is to actually get an app on the App Store right now. So I think there's a lot of people thinking about it from that perspective, like, what is the process going to look like moving forward? And is it going to be harder to get our apps in the App Store? What type of checks are we going to have to go through to make sure we're complying with whatever the future of IDFA is now? Like, what are all the things we're going to do? And I think you're right. I think Apple isn't responsible for, or they don't have a reason as to provide here's all the resources to make your life better on the App Store. I think that essentially will make them a little bit more competitive in the space. But I think just in retrospect of every other thing that they've rolled out, whether it be the new guidelines for getting an app on the App Store, the location tracking, like all these things that have come before this, they've been a little bit more open and just have more documentation on it. And I think what's missing here is the documentation. Like, if I go and I look for IDFA guidelines, you're not really finding anything that's for this rollout. You might find one or two speculation articles or very broad, but there's nothing. And then if you go and look at anything that came out around location tracking, although location tracking isn't advertising, it's still really pertinent to a lot of the apps that are in the same space. So it's
great.
It's there, but it's just not here for this.
Okay, unless there's a counterpoint or just something kind of above and beyond, I want to move to the next question and get Leo and Claire involved. But if this is a panel, so a lot of love, but you guys can feel free to take gloves off and disagree a little bit. So now that with Apple's postponed launch, what does it allow your company to do, and how have you guys sort of talked internally as it relates to probably a mad dash to sort of make changes and sort of support and ensure your business can survive? But now you have more time. So starting with you, Leo, and then Claire, what does this sort of extension, if you will, or delay mean to you guys?
For us, it doesn't mean much. It means, a longer runway. We've been in development on identity graph solutions and testing our identity graph solution and some other solutions against some ghost ad campaigns. And to my surprise, quite honestly, it was much more successful. I was expecting to see percentages like 50, 60% success, and we're seeing 80, 90% success. So from my perspective, it's just more time to perfect, more campaigns to run, more opportunities to build a better product and prepare for D-Day, or the tsunami as we call it.
Okay, Claire, your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, we joined Leo on the time, 100% when we when, for instance, the GDPR arrived, like we had almost a year to change everything on the application even more. Today we had for Apple some months, which is not a lot when we actually need to rebuild all a deterministic tracking system. So I think definitely this time is welcome by all advertisers to test all the MMP solutions, but also to see and go deeper into the SCAD network to make developer work on it and see what can be the next long-term solution that we can actually have. We are also really happy that it's after Christmas, because we all know that the Q4 season is quite a huge one and really profitable. To me, like these things postponed makes sense because we didn't have a lot of time to work on it. I feel like everyone worked on it at the same time. Facebook, Google, MMPs. And actually now we, as advertiser, we have time to test it, to consider all the solutions that you guys are going to share with us and really have the choice and not feel like we have to test it, we have to do it 100% because we have this release of iOS 14 and we will have stability on our algorithm as well because until Christmas our video campaign will be sustainable. So I'm quite happy about this. It's quite great.
Yeah, I when we had our kind of group call last week or whatnot in advance of this, I literally saw people I know on Twitter that live in that work in the industry that seem to be like popping bottles at a level like we just found a vaccine for COVID. Olivia or Garrett, do you have any sort of additional points to the? I mean, yeah, to sort of to the point around this extension and what it means to your business. Is it just is it more time to prepare, or is it? Yeah, I guess in the context of how significant the delay is, what does that mean to you? And then we'll move to the next question.
You know, like Claire said, it gives us a little bit more time to test. I agree with that. I think, you know, because of the lack of clarity, and Claire brings up a good point, was, you know, another predecessor to this was GDPR. I mean, Apple gave a lot of resources on GDPR, although that wasn't their doing. They still gave their app developers a lot of resources on that. So it's, you know, it's another retrospective look, but it's just more time to prepare. I know I work with a lot of startups right now who don't necessarily have the budgets to go out and find all of these things. They might have, you know, life cycle softwares like Braze and Iterable and things like that to help them kind of craft their user life cycle to be a little bit more careful with that. But I think it just really gives people just more time to digest and really just get a better idea of what's going on. You know, hopefully they will give more information as this pushback has happened. You know, we have, you know, significantly more time, but I think it really helps, like Claire said, with Q4 being really big and the banking and the shopping and the gaming industries. It just gives people, one, the opportunity to maximize that quarter, and then two, just more time to prepare for everything that's coming up.
Yeah, I would agree with Olivia 100%, but in the spirit of Chris's request to have some level of disagreement, I would say there's really three types of people in this world, and this applies to advertising as well. A third of the people will take this, 6 months or 5 months, whatever it is, and sort of do nothing. A third of the people will aggressively test new solutions, will work with their MMP partner to do A/B testing, to evaluate consent solutions, to still have the ability to deterministically measure push campaigns, and if that's integrated with their MMP, even better. They'll evaluate consent solutions and do all sorts of testing as has been discussed. And then a third of the companies will push the envelope on what is actually possible. Kochava is in that latter camp, where we're developing and innovating solutions for really advancing what is possible with attribution and measurement, advanced measurement, incrementality testing, A/B testing, push messaging, consent management, all tied in one. And so I think there are, kind of three camps that break out over the next 6 months, and there's going to be a lot of innovation that that will help support this rollout.
Really interesting point, Garrett. Yeah, I as you were talking through, I was sort of thinking about, you can make the case that in these situations, and even sort of as I alluded to kind of the environment that we're all in with COVID, while a lot of sort of companies will crumble, unfortunately, given their sort of respective verticals, you could also make the counterpoint, which is it's also an opportunity to see what kinds of companies rise through the ashes, and it's like they have a gun to their head right now, so they're forced to innovate and be very thoughtful in regards to new products and solutions. So I actually would buy into that. Not sure who it is, but there's certainly going to be a new wave of sort of innovation as relates to how this space works and how the space innovates. Olivia, when you mentioned earlier, which I think is a good kind of call out as it pertains to GDPR being kind of the initial wave as relates to privacy, how do any of you guys have sort of individual perspectives or thoughts as it relates to the need for advertisers to reach people outside of sort of walled gardens and mobile and run effective campaigns, both brand and performance, but also sort of this the idea around privacy. There's never been more attention on privacy as a result of kind of data breach and challenges that Facebook has faced. So I know it may be a hard thing to answer, just given working for your organization and not trying to get anyone in trouble. But I'd be curious to get sort of the what's good for the business versus what's good for the consumer angle. And maybe I'll start with Leo, since we haven't heard from you from a little bit, and then
from my perspective, absolutely outside of the walled gardens, and obviously the walled gardens are going to experience. You saw Facebook talking about the impact this will have on their business, so they're going to be impacted greatly. But from my perspective, a brand's responsibility is to build a really intimate relationship with their consumers. So that can't be one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And I'm sure, part of what we're seeing from Apple is a setup for them to launch an advertising solution. I mean, if I were Tim Cook and I was thinking about how to grow a business the size of the biggest business in the world, I would look at what worked for Facebook and Google and some of these other companies. So absolutely, brands need to be working across many channels. It will never change. I think it's short-sighted if you do.
Okay. Yeah, I when you mentioned sort of Apple and brands, I'm always just kind of thinking about the Quattro acquisition and sort of shutdown. I've always sort of kind of experienced that Apple has never really had a high degree of interest in that, in both monetization and working with advertisers. I don't know if anyone...
Google bought AdMob, and then
right.
Apple bought Quattro, and we thought that we were going to see like a battle, and then they kind of just shut it down. But I think the one thing that you can't deny is there's a huge opportunity. There's an enormous business for a company like Apple to tap into this space. So I think this is just the beginning of something much bigger.
Okay, Claire.
I think I will be a bit more pessimistic, because I think even if it's a brand positioning from Apple to keep pushing these security features that now clearly show that DSPs and self-attributing network can't use all those IDFA. I think it's also a real legal landscape. Like, everyone wants to regulate internet, and it's something that they have to do. Like an IDFA, today you can get a location and everything, which is really close to a PII. So I really think anyway it was something that needed to happen. And I'm not fully against the SCAD network, because to me it was a really great solution for the user also to get some privacy. I think what's unfair at the moment is more the thing that that Apple pre-opting that you will get the data and not share it. This is really unfair, and this is using a competitive advantage for sure. But I think this is good, to be honest, because we can't always have deterministic data. Like, all UA managers, they saw that it was not effective, because anyway you can't track everything, and maybe behavioral will also decrease the prices. Like, I hope some platform like Facebook, for instance, where you have a cost per install really expensive on some campaigns, like video campaigns and everything, to also adjust their pricing. And so I will be quite curious to see how it will go and which result we will have from it. So definitely, I think we we can see some opportunities for the one that will want to work with Sky Network and also not work on short-term solution, but really work with Apple on it. But for that, we need some time anyway to figure it out.
I want to kind of take that and sort of open this up for the group, which we've kind of, SCAD Network has come up multiple times, so I feel like we need to come back to it as far as both how to make most use of it, but also to answer the question, what's the future? What do the alternatives look like? We kind of touched on it a little bit. I think Garrett sort of opened up this dialogue, but I'd like to spend a few minutes sort of talking about alternative channels, alternative solutions, what's being tested, what's not, what's being ruled out, in the hopes that some of our listeners and participants can, get the juices flowing, because maybe some of the panelists here and their companies are a little bit more advanced in those discussions. But let's talk a little bit about both SCAD Network and some alternative ways to kind of move forward, given the same information that everyone has.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Claire. It's like I'm a little bit more on the pessimistic side. I think, like Leo said, I think there is something coming for the advertising space. I think they are going to roll out their own advertising platform. It's the timing thing is an issue. Apple doesn't always have the best timing when it comes to rolling out new platforms and new features. So I don't think we're going to see something at the beginning of the year. To be honest, I think it's going to be some more time, but I do think that they're working on something. SCAD Network is something that if you have the infrastructure to support and build on it, it works great. But, especially in my camp, when I'm working with a lot of my current clients, and even within the company I work for right now, we're really focused on that user lifecycle path and really growing and engaging with our current users. That goes down to in-app notifications and all of that. And kind of like what Garrett touched on before, that there's these three camps that you might fall into. The number one thing you don't want to fall into is the first camp, where you're not really doing anything. And I think, and this is my personal opinion, but I think if you're not currently testing and optimizing for a fluid opt-in, and really strategizing, like, how does your brand fit into like how the opt-in works, and how can you make it really seamless and make it like less scary for your users, you're not going to make it. Like, you have to be optimizing for that. And because this is not going to go away. Apple rarely, if ever, has rolled back on something like this, and you really need to be optimizing for it. And that's what I'm working on with like 90% of my clients right now, is like, how do we make this really pretty and seamless, and make what people want to opt into the IDFA versus just, kind of being cut off at the knees.
It's really just like we saw when the location boom happened, and it's up to the developers, right? So, developers have to get clever. I see developers really getting serious. They're heads down trying to figure out nice ways to present that message and say, hey, we're going to track you, but in return, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z. And those relationships over the years do work if you do them the right way. I remember all the way back when when my mother, I was like, Mom, put your credit card in. I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. That eventually went away and people became comfortable. I'll put my credit card in online. It's not going to get stolen. I'll get this in return, the convenience. I'll let you track my location in return. You'll tell me how to get to the corner store in the most optimized way. And I think the same opportunity arises for tracking somebody. It will be a challenge, but it's the new boom, right? You're gonna have ID companies popping up everywhere. It's gonna be the new fraud innovation. Fraud, you had 10,000 fraud companies pop up in 2 years, same thing. Over the next couple of years, you're gonna see ID companies, ID locker companies, this, that, and the other thing. But it's not something that's gonna kill the industry. And that's the one thing I think it's really important for the folks on this call and the community to come together. It's really our problem to solve, and let's not just rely on Apple. Let's put together and build something innovative without Apple.
I like your point, and agree with you, Leo, as far as the kind of the analogy of other sort of seismic behavioral changes that have taken place over the last 10 years and how consumers generally respond. I think the question around that, or where I generally feel like you get over the hump, is when it's clear what the value exchange is. what you get in return. And I think you alluded to that with your
That's
some
the
of your
developers' problem.
correct.
And developers are some of the most innovative folks in the world. Gaming developers, location developers that are providing a value. They'll figure it out. And I can tell you, the MMPs are bright. They have big pockets. I know the folks at Kochava, Charles and Garrett, they're heads down developing really cool technology. We're not all rolling over because Apple decided they want to build an ad network one day or replace MMPs. And I think that's the most important thing as a community that we can do is stand up and work together.
I think there's an important part about SCAD network that limitations with SCAD network. I mean, on the one hand, Apple has made it very clear that they don't want to get in the middle of the consent, management part of it. The IDFA opt-in, as an example, doesn't support GDPR or CCPA. So if you talk about, disrupting or adding friction to that user experience, there's got to be some way that a developer can communicate that value exchange with their end user, and then somehow deep link that user directly into the app permissions to get that user to convince or influence in a non-scummy, way that is, compliant with both the spirit and the letter of the law that Apple has announced under the guise of privacy and user, data handling and all these sorts of things. But the reality of it is that adding another step in that flow is definitely going to add friction to that user experience from an onboarding perspective. And so, as an MMP, the only MMP with a consent management platform built into our solution, we are doing a lot of innovation around that. We launched that solution in advance of the GDPR, and we've got 2 years head start. The second thing that's really important is that SCAD network on its own is insufficient for an advertiser that's running multi-channel campaigns. So you think about incrementality testing, media mix modeling, multi-channel attribution, multi-touch attribution, like all of this, SCAD network solution with a deterministic cohort-based, framework really needs to be measured against the probabilistic device-based attribution, and so SCAD network on its own, while it is while Apple has announced that it is the de facto solution for iOS, it doesn't support a lot of larger advertisers. The third thing is there's really no winners in all of this except Apple, and I think that's what's forced their hand to maybe delay things and rethink things. There's a lot of speculation whether as long as Apple is in an epic battle with Epic Games, their heavy-handed approach will need to be moderated to some extent. As long as companies like Zynga, as somebody mentioned earlier, and Facebook are very clear about their challenges that they're going to have with monetization, I think these things will continue to force Apple to rethink their banhammer approach. And particularly, this thing was all veiled as user privacy, but Apple is able to use the IDFA, and so it sort of brings some questions around that.
They're kind of contradict. Yeah, that's interesting. Given that they're essentially contradicting their view or their stance, if they're able to leverage the data. And Garrett, I think that's an interesting point you bring up about Epic and sort of the it's long been sort of discussed and understood that the 30% tax has been pretty painful for some of the larger players. I know Spotify has been in that as well, and I've been again watching from the sidelines with my popcorn the kind of some of these larger players supporting both on Twitter and other places what Epic is doing. So I actually hadn't thought about the potential repercussions or just how many fights they want to be in at the current stage, and how this sort of rollback, how those two things were connected. I guess only a handful of people in the spaceship there in Cupertino would know that, but yeah.
Particularly in light of antitrust and other privacy things that are happening in the ecosystem. So I agree.
Cool. Any other questions or thoughts or counterpoints before we move forward?
Yeah, I think like on my side, I will be a bit less pessimistic on the SCAD network. I think anyway, like everyone will need to adapt at the adoption rate we will have, depending on the opt-in rate in the application. So if we don't have the opt-in rate anyway, we will not be able to use the IDFA. And another important thing to say as well is that there is not one way to target your user. You can also use like a social ID. You can use a phone number. Like there is a lot of different data that can help you to actually target your user. I think I never saw as much innovation that since Scan Network has been launched, even more on the IDFA with the cross promotion. I think this is going to be a big thing also moving forward on Apple. So I wouldn't say like it's not a good thing. I think it's a really good thing to change the way we think as a marketer and also do things in a different way. And I think people that won't change the way they are doing things are just going to really struggle, because today no one is optimizing with the UIID, for instance, which was the previous one.
One last thing, we're going to move off of this. This is just sort of a kind of a Hail Mary question, but is there any chance from and maybe I should have saved this for the end to kind of go down, but just yes or no, that does Apple altogether pull this back? Do they change their stance at any stage and just say for whatever reasons we're going to keep things as is with some level of modifications, or is that too late?
I don't think so.
Okay, Olivia's a no. Garrett?
I think no.
All right, I think I see a trend. Claire?
No.
Okay. Leo, you want to just take the counter for fun?
Why not? Yes, they will.
Okay.
We're going to make a change, and we're going to come together and scare Apple. And they're going to go run away and change their mind.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I figured that. Just had to ask. So Claire, let's start with you here, and just make sure we can hear you. Okay. What effects will all this have on the ability to serve non-app Facebook ads with placements to iOS devices?
So actually, I was quite surprised because the best documentation we had was from DSP. During this time, we are all like we didn't know how it was about to happen. A lot of ad networks shared a lot with us. And I really think that at the end of the day, they are the one that adopted some test on LAT behavioral segmentation, for instance. And it really showed a great result for a lot of advertisers. So I think even if you're not a social media, you can still ally with the market and find out something from the user. I think at the moment, if everyone work together, we can figure out something from them. And as DSPs when you take all the DSP, you have a pool of audience which is even bigger than other networks like Facebook, for instance. So you can really, if they ally, I think, have something really competitive on the market. So I would really try some LAT campaign with them if I was an app publisher or someone that wanted to try something in this ad network world.
Olivia or Leo, anything to add as it pertains to Facebook before we move on?
Yeah, so in one of my previous roles, we had to run Facebook ads for a non-app marketplace facing app before. So it kind of makes me think of when we did that. We had our own landing page that had a Apple Toolkit enabled, and people had a really seamless experience for downloading the app. I don't think that's the approach that everyone is going to be able to take to run these type of ads, but at the end of the day, we had a business team that ran really tight analytics that we were able to measure it, and that's what worked for us. I think we'll see a little bit of that. Like, I don't want to say people are going to take their apps off the app market because that just doesn't work, but there's going to be some like really smart workarounds that people will get to that acquisition point, and that will probably be one of them. If we can't directly have an advertisement that says click here to download, but we can go to a landing page that allows them to download it very seamlessly. We might see a lot of that, and I think it makes a lot of sense too, because you can also build on the experience that the user has. You know, not everyone is able to easily download apps from the app store. Sometimes they forget their password, all these different things. And when we ran that process, we actually could go around that because of how it was set up. So we can really focus on the user's experience from that perspective. But it'll be interesting to see if anyone else starts testing that to make it a very unique experience. But again, it doesn't work for everyone.
You know, trying to circumvent Apple, and you'll see more players getting innovative in the way that they put their brand or their product on a consumer's device. So definitely it'll be a point that a lot of folks are focusing on.
Right. We talked a little bit about, so much of this is focused on sort of what it means for businesses like yours as relates to revenue and spend. What's been the pulse from the advertising community as relates to this? Are they generally positive and sort of, we're going to get through this and we're partners? Are there others that will take advantage of it as relates to pricing or spend or volume and scale? What's been the general sort of consensus? Yeah,
the trend was everyone was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And everyone wanted to take meetings and talk about how things were going to be solved. And then I think they realized, it wasn't a problem that was going to get solved very quickly. And brands and developers, no one is coming out of this without pain. So everyone put their head down and started to work on solutions. And I think, folks, I saw shifts in budgets to Android, and I saw people hesitant to launch Android or iOS campaigns because they didn't know what was going to happen. They thought they were wasting money. And I also saw folks scurrying to try and figure out a solution. So I think everyone can take a breath now, but the reality of it is Android is still a very big player globally. It's much bigger than iOS. So let's not forget about Google, and let's not forget about the Android platform. And then from our perspective, as far as budgets, we try to work on a performance model, and I think you'll see more of it, right? So rather than a download, let's pay me when I make a sale, pay me when I make a subscription. So we try to focus more on that end result, and we try to be unbiased how we bring that result. Now, definitely we started to focus more on Android and how to improve our Android capabilities and even build out, a really first-class Android platform for retargeting and user acquisition. And then, as I said before, build out, some unique ways to create identity tracker and targeting solutions on iOS. But definitely budgets have slowed down, but it's not like people stop spending money. They're just being more smart about it.
Has anyone seen any other reaction specifically from the ad community? And then does anyone disagree or just sort of have a different opinion as relates to the weight of Google's Android?
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw quite the opposite on my side. I saw a lot of advertisers spend a lot on iOS because of this release that was about to happen. But it's true that a lot of advertisers wanted to shift by this month, actually, the budget, but before they spent even more and created a lot of pool of audience and everything just to get it and to have it. What I saw as well is that some other advertisers saw some opportunities to continue to spend heavily on iOS because for a lot of games, actually, iOS is the highest LTV they can get, even more in some games where you have a really high USP. So some people said, let's spend even more because we will have less competition. I think it really depends on how each saw this, but to me, I think you can't deal without iOS because, it's like a marketplace. If you need a user, you need to be in the store where your user is. And at the moment, we have only one store on Apple, which is iTunes. So I can't see how we could deal without it.
Garrett, well, I'd like to get your opinions, but still on the advertiser track. And then to follow that as two questions for you. Do you ever see Google following Apple's moves or behavior, or are they just going to kind of enjoy kind of staying on the sideline?
Yeah, I've seen, I guess, a little bit of both. I've seen a run on iOS because of the deterministic capabilities, because of potentially higher monetization in certain industries, and because of the short, potentially short window or time period with which an advertiser can buy iOS deterministically and deterministically measure the feedback loop. So I saw that on the advertising side. And then again, because we have a data business that's built on the backs of our free app analytics device graph, I've seen a run on data, for companies in the ad tech space that are, trying to enrich their bidding and buying algorithms, but also advertisers and marketers looking to enrich what they know about their users, because typically all you know about your users is the ad signal, the impressions and the clicks that they're exposed to, and then what happens inside the app and or on the website, whether they engage or re-engage. And so there's a whole constellation of other attributes and metadata that can inform targeting and inform insights about your users to help run more effective campaigns. And there's been a massive run on data acquisition, knowing that first party data and second party data are really key to building effective marketing strategies. The second question, I think there's two camps that are developing. I think there's one camp that says, yes, Google follows suit within 12 months like they usually do. And that's particularly relevant or obvious, I guess I should say, knowing that, they've made it very clear that over the next, 18 months or 20 months now, that third-party cookies are dead. And so that would be a natural progression or next step for them to do something around the ad ID. And then there's another camp, perhaps growing in popularity, that says they don't follow suit in light of this banhammer approach that Apple has done. I think the difference between the two is that Google, in their deprecation of third-party cookies, has given the ecosystem 24 months to innovate, whereas Apple gave us basically 3 months. And while that's been pushed back, I think that Google, in this second camp that says they don't follow suit, I think they take a lot of these learnings and come up with a different approach. The open nature of Android, is a lot different, and so I think you're going to see a different approach. Although user privacy, just back to one of the earlier questions, I think I may have misspoke. Like, I want to make it very clear, like, everything that we do, consent and consumer privacy is at the heart of every decision around the technology that we build or the company that we buy. And so, we really need to protect the industry from itself. And so I think that we'll likely see something from Google over the next 12 months, but it's clear that that banhammer approach won't work. So interesting.
Garrett or anyone, I mean, if I'm not in the trenches at the level that you guys are today, but just from my many years in mobile, I mean, what's the percentage now? What's the implication as far as Apple being predominantly US and Android international as it relates to the same question, or is it basically a moot point?
You mean market share?
Market share, ad spend, exactly. Just for specifically for the
Apple's predominant in the US. Not much has changed. Maybe Android's releasing some cool new devices, and Samsung's foldable phone. So there's some innovation there. But for the US and advertisers here, it's iOS. So the US has been heavily impacted from this news.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting point as it relates to Google having time both to sort of watch how this plays out, but it also allows them more time to prepare and potentially win over a part of the ecosystem, just given maybe softer hands or a more gentle approach, like whatever that strategy is. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how that goes. With about, if I'm not mistaken, with about 7 minutes, I want to also open up. We have a lot more. I certainly have a lot more questions that I can go through, but with time, I want to open up to those on the call as well. So TATIA, I'm going to, I guess, roll off to the next one. But if there's another question, oh, sorry, I did see one. Still learning where buttons are on Zoom, everybody. Any thoughts on from a timing perspective?
I think it's up in the air when it comes to the timing on it. I think we could see something within a year of when IDFA actually kicks in. But I also feel like, you know, Apple has always been, they're really trying to push to be the leader in mobile privacy. And they have always put the consumer overall above that, with little to no consideration for the actual apps and advertisers that are on their platform. And like Garrett and Claire have said, I think we'll see a little bit. I think it's going to be expected to come from Google as well, but I think we'll see a little bit more of a like privacy for all perspective from Google. I think they'll like everyone has said. I think they're going to wait to see how this plays out, but I think they're going to be a little bit more lenient towards the advertisers. I mean, Google ads have existed for a very long time for a reason, and people still use them for a reason. And I think Google really understands the level of investment that a lot of companies have in their products, and also just the longevity. I mean, they make a significant amount of money. I think the timeline can be up in the air, but I would say anywhere from 12 to 24 months, we'll see something start to happen. But I think it'll have less of a like drastic, you know, hit to all of the advertisers, because they've seen how this plays out.
And let's not forget, Google's an advertiser and a publisher. That's an advertising
Right.
company and a publisher. They make apps, so they
Right.
understand the pain much more intimately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have as much skin in the game as any of us do. So,
That's a good point. Yeah, whereas Apple, yeah, their core is obviously around hardware and their underpinning software. We again, any questions now that I can see the chat, please toss them out. We kind of touched on Facebook, but there's one specifically, and I think it's obviously a good point. We talked about ads, but the question is, how do you plan on leveraging Facebook analytics to optimize campaigns, if at all?
yeah, this is an interesting question, because I think there is a lot of advertisers who have had their fair share of issues with Facebook analytics, and just how they've seen a lot of inconsistencies between campaigns and their actual data. So I think there's two parts to this question. I think, yes, I personally think I will be leveraging it a little bit more now. So, but I also think, because Facebook being as heavily impacted, I would expect them to take a second look at their analytics and really address a lot of the attribution issues that have been there before with people on the platform. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start revamping and making things a lot, not only more clear, but also just a lot more user friendly, and maybe a little bit more aggressive as well. Because I don't know about anyone else here, but I've always kind of taken Facebook analytics with a grain of salt, and I've gone to my outside, either my internal analytics team, or even outside third-party tools to really validate a lot of that data and kind of pinpoint the inconsistencies there. So I think, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if people rely on it a little bit more, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Facebook really fine-tunes that too, because they're just as effective and they want to keep their business as well.
Are we going to see any? Will we? I mean, there's 90 days or whatever the timeline is. Are we past the point of seeing companies come together to solve problems together? You know, Kochava plus a couple other, like, you know, companies that maybe would be sort of traditionally competitors to sort of share R&D or whatnot, or is that just kind of too out of whack and too challenging to pull off?
Well, I can address directly, I guess, with Kochava. I know we have a lot of things that are in the works in terms of, you know, developing our own solutions, partnering with both sides of the ecosystem to create solutions for connecting identity across both supply and demand. These, you know, a lot of the growth over the next, you know, 12 to 24 months is going to have to come from partnerships, just based on the overall size of the ecosystem and where the ball or puck is moving. You know, partnerships with companies like Roku and OTT, CTV, partnerships with Amazon and in products like Fire TV and other experiences. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of partnerships. Whether that means with direct competitors has yet to be seen. But we're certainly not trying to teach the ecosystem what we have been developing for the last 24 months, with our ability to connect identity across supply and demand in a way that's both compliant with the spirit and the letter of the law that Apple has announced, and respecting user privacy and consumer data handling requirements. So we will see.
Yeah, and I think also, just to Garrett's point, I think we'll see a fair amount of technology partnerships, but I think we'll also see a lot of brand partnerships as well. I know a lot of people in this space are currently looking at that, on top of like influencer marketing that has been a little bit bigger of a boom now as well, to really leverage the user data and the user acquisition. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of brands start moving even more so towards that, especially with like TikTok and all of the newer platforms that are available for advertising. A lot of times you see gaming and more consumer focused apps like shopping on those type of platforms, but I wouldn't be surprised if because of this, we're going to see a lot more brand partnerships from like a co-marketing perspective, but also just apps like that are in like the banking space and like the not so common like influencery apps really start taking advantage of those types of partnerships, because that is a way that they can, one, get other apps to share user data so they can have better user acquisition, but also just have a bigger footprint in the advertising space.
Makes a ton of sense, Olivia. Thanks for that note. So we're basically at time. Want to kind of wrap this up. What I wanted to sort of give final words, and you could go anything from who wins the election to what's the timing of the vaccine, or who wins the KC Houston game, or tonight, for those of you that care about football being back, or you could answer any final closing sort of comments specifically for this topic, and we are going to wrap it up from there. And before we do, I just want to thank all you guys for the thoughts and your time, and I hope there was a lot of value for the participants that joined on a very important subject. So I'm just going left to right, starting with Olivia, Garrett, then Claire, and then Leo, and we're going to sign off.
Yeah, I think for me, just with closing thoughts, honestly, I'm pretty excited about. Obviously, this is a big hit to a lot of people, but I'm really excited to see the strategization that we're going to see throughout the customer funnel. I think, given a lot of the companies that I work with, even the one I currently work with and previously, there's a big shift in the focus on what does our consumer journey look like and how are we really taking care of our customers. Because at the end of the day, if you take care of your customers and you build a really robust engagement system, one, they're going to bring more customers to you, and two, you'll just have like really good brand alignment with the customer base. So I'm really excited to see the strategization that goes into that to help kind of offset a lot of the costs that will eventually come with this, but also just the new ways, like I mentioned, with brand partnerships and influencer marketing, that we can really kind of hack around this and still bring users on. So really excited to see the things that come out of this and see what creative ways companies will really focus on the opt-in impact and really make it really engaging and fun.
Great, thank you, Garrett.
So one, for sure, KC. Two, I'll stay away from the political debates. But three, I think there's a couple themes that we've been seeing develop. One that's been around for 8 years, as long as I've been in advertising, and that's around consolidation. I think you're seeing a lot of the consolidation that we talked about for the last 8 years is really starting to happen. We're seeing that, companies have raised large sums of money, and now those board meetings are going to get difficult with increased, difficulty around monetization, both on the ad tech side as well as on in the app ecosystem. And so I think this brings about some changes, and a lot of people are going to be sitting up a little bit straighter in their chairs. Instead of just accepting and adopting these changes, it really is going to drive some of the innovation to really protect ourselves from ourselves, as the industry from ourselves, as I mentioned earlier, and clean up some of the nefarious actors in the ecosystem, which is all good for the ecosystem. And I think anything that is focused around user privacy is a good thing for our industry. Having said that, I think there's you know, a lot of marketers need to are reevaluating their decisions around technology. This is a great time to do so, and not just to do shopping and try to, you know, educate your existing partners on what's out there, but really to make decisions around a unified solution. So something that has push messaging and SMS and in-app messaging integrated within the stack for both acquisition and marketing, for acquisition and re-engagement, but also having consent baked into the solution and at the core of everything that you do around marketing and advertising. With your measurement and analytics, I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of companies that are looking for consolidated solutions. At least that's what we're hearing and seeing on the street.
Cool, thank you, Garrett. Claire and Leo, just quick comments since we're a little over time. Thanks.
Yes. So just shortly, of what I'm seeing, I began as a CRM manager, then I was UA manager, then I was growth marketer because I made re-engagement, post-promo, user acquisition. And now I feel like we will just be even more than growth manager because we will just follow all KPIs, organic included. So I'm really optimistic about all my work and my job evolves, and I'm really happy about it and about this release from
To bring the industry closer together, as I mentioned before, and you know, I really think it's going to be exciting. There's going to be tremendous innovation. I'm actually more excited than ever before. I think that the results already are starting to be very promising, and look out, you know, and it's going to be fun. So I want to thank you, Chris, and thank you all the panelists for joining. It was a really fruitful discussion, and I hope to have more of these with you over the next coming months.
Thank you, Leo, and for everyone else. And I like closing out on the being optimistic about what's in front of us. So thanks again, everyone. And I guess this will be shared for future circulation, but I'll leave that to the rest of you guys. And thanks for joining.